I'm Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years, I used living history in the classroom. And that was kind of easy because I do historical reenactment on the weekends. But I used my hobby to feed my profession or my career. And for 36 years, I'd dress up for whatever time period we were covering, and I would bring in artifacts and, you know, try to make the subject more real, more alive for the kids. I guess that's why they call it living history. Well, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I have a bunch of garb at home, and I have a passion for bringing the past to life. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a deep dive into California history because, you know, I have that opportunity now. And so what I've been doing is I've already researched the California missions and the presidios and told their stories in garb, and then that led to me looking at various bandits and outlaws because I found out a number of them had frequented saloons that were actually in the secularized missions. And that led to me looking at stagecoaches. So what I'm doing now is I'm on the trail of the very first person to try to hold up a stagecoach in California. So I'm following the trail of Thomas Hodges, who is more commonly known as Tom Bell. I hope you stick with me on my journey. Okay, our story is actually going to end here in Firebaugh, California. I'm basically in northern Fresno County, and the reason I'm actually putting this a little bit at the beginning is to kind of set up the end of the story. All right, so there's a man named Andrew D. Firebaugh. He's from Virginia. After the Mexican War, he comes to California, and he is the person who builds the first road through Pacheco Pass, which is like a big deal. And then what he does is in 1854, along the shores of the San Joaquin River, or the banks of the San Joaquin River, which is behind me, he ends up building a trading post and a ferry. And in time, this becomes known as Firebaugh's Ferry. Later, when this becomes a town, it'll just get shortened to Firebaugh. And the reason I'm mentioning this, I've mentioned this place before. The notorious outlaw Tiburcio Vazquez, when he was attempting to get reestablished and he was starting to lose control of his gang and he needed a success, he tried a robbery here. And the person he was supposed to rob wasn't on the stage, and neither was the money that was supposed to be transported. So that's going to lead to him trying to stage the robbery at Tres Pinos, which ends up being called the Tres Pinos tragedy, which is pretty much the beginning of the end of his career. But what's going to happen here is we're going to have the end of the story of the very first attempt to rob a stage in California, and that'll take place here. Tom Bell was a Western outlaw. He operated in California in the 1850s. He was born Thomas Hodges, and he is actually known for organizing the first attempt to rob a stagecoach. Hodges saw action in the Mexican War. It kind of depends which source you look at as far as, you know, what he did. Some say he was a medical orderly. One source says he was a surgeon. After the war, we know that he showed up in California and he was a prospector. Now, We have differences in the stories. One version says he was lousy at prospecting and became a professional gambler. Another source goes with that and says, oh yeah, and he sometimes practiced medicine. Yet another version says he was really good at prospecting, but lost all his money because of gambling. So again, take your pick. Well, Hodges fell on hard times, and I guess to supplement his income, he stole 5 mules and got caught and was sentenced to prison. And at this time in California, 1851, there's no building that's a prison. What there was the Waban, an old ship that was anchored off of Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And there he became inmate number 24. And the inmates had a job. They were to quarry stone to help in building the first state prison, in Marin County. That would be San Quentin. Well, Hodges didn't care for this at all. And he faked being really ill in order to be sent over to San Francisco County Jail. And from there he escaped, but he was caught a short time later. This time he gave the name of Tom Bell, who was like a small-time cattle rustler, which seems kind of appropriate. He stole animals before. And also a lot of people that ended up going to prison ended up giving different names if they were going back as repeat offenders, which kind of had me confused because I would think they would be recognized. Anyway, he's going to spend the next few years helping to, along with the 250 other inmates, helping to build the first stone and brick cell block and some of the other buildings. This was all done by like 1854. Now he's biding his time. On May 12th, 1855, Tom Hodges, well actually now he's Tom Bell, remember that's the name he's going by, escaped from San Quentin along with Bill White, who was more commonly known as Bill Gristy, Ned Converly, who ended up becoming Ned Connor, and a number of others. So they've escaped into the hills, and what they're going to do is they're going to organize a gang. It'll be under the leadership of Bell. Their hangout is going to be Jack Phillips' Mountaineer House near Auburn. And it was like a stage stop and a hotel. And what they did is they ended up preying upon mountain travelers and isolated mining camps. And what would end up happening is Jack Phillips, who ran the stage stop, he would tip off the gang as to which people had money. And the gang was really organized. Each member carried a bullet marked with an X. I guess that was their secret little sign, which will prove to be their undoing later. And there were about 30 members of the gang, but they weren't all members at the same time. So they sort of rotated in and out. And this is the gang that's going to be terrorizing the area. Problem is, Tom Bell is really, really erratic in his behavior. At one point, he came across a peddler, robbed the peddler, tied him to a tree, and then killed him. Yet with somebody else that he robbed, he shot him in the leg, helped bandage him, got a passing wagon to take him and go to take his victim for medical attention. So it was kind of like you did not know which Tom Bell you were going to get at any particular time. Okay, here we go. First attempted stage robbery on August 12th of 1856. Bell and his gang get word from Jack Phillips about the Camptonville, Marysville stage. It's moving. It's gonna have $100,000 in gold bullion, and the first stagecoach robbery in California is going to be attempted. Stages had been ripped off before, but they had been parked. Think of it more a lot like, you've parked your car at a mall and you've gone in and you've done your thing and you've come back and it's open and your stuff's gone. That's the kind of stuff that took place with stages or stagecoaches before. But now Bell's going to step it up. He intends to stop the stage when it's in motion. Only something goes wrong. Guys jump out with their guns, stop, put your hands up, and what the stagecoach driver does instead is he transfers the reins to his left hand, and his right hand he grabs the whip and he starts whipping the horses. So the stage isn't stopping. To make it worse, the passengers draw guns and they start firing at the outlaws. And one of them gets a minor wound, but several passengers were severely wounded. And the stage travels on into town, and there's bullet holes all over the stage. And depending on which account you read, the wife of someone who is very well respected in town dies. I only read that in one account. But now, people go nuts. The law is after the Bell gang, and vigilantes are forming up. They're after the Bell gang, because remember, this is the era of vigilante justice. And it's kind of a race, and they're chasing the gang all over the place. Oh, by the way, when I mentioned that the gang had 30 members, it wasn't 30 members all at the same time. People just kind of changed affiliations. But remember, these guys are all carrying that, that bullet with the X on it. So this happens in mid-August. By mid-September, Rocher, who's also known as Fernandez, and Gristy, they get caught. And the sheriff of Calaveras County is taking a look at this guy. Hey, this guy has a bullet with an X on it. Hey, this guy has a bullet with an X on it. Oh, this probably means something. And on a hunch, he uses these bullets to trick Jack Phillips, the guy who owns the stage stop and the hotel, and that's near Auburn. And Phillips confesses, yes, okay, I'm part of the gang. And now they're going to sweat Gristy a bit more, because I guess Fernandez is a bit more tight-lipped. And because there's, the whole vigilante, mob, the lynch mob is forming outside, and they want Gristy. And the sheriff basically tells them, you talk or I hand you over to them. And Gristy sang, and he'd said where Bell was and where the gang were. Okay. In pursuing this lead, a big fight takes place, lots of gunplay. Ned Connor gets killed. Percy Owens, who was known as Tex, he gets away, and he gets aboard a coastal steamer, and he's going to head down to Mexico. Well, he gets caught on the steamer at one point, and Bell manages to get away. Okay, he gets away, But now the word is out, he's headed towards Firebaugh's Ferry. And the sheriff from Stockton is racing to get to Bell. When he arrives, he's found out, the gang of vigilantes got a hold of him on October 4th, about 11 a.m., a few miles from here, a few miles downstream or downriver, and they tried sweating him for the names of his compatriots, and he wouldn't talk. And then Bell asked if he could write a letter to his mother, and they let him do that. And by 5 o'clock, they'd lynched him. And he's buried around here someplace. Okay, as to the rest of the gang, very few of them actually did time. Jack Phillips did a couple of years at the prison that Bell helped build, San Quentin, and his wife was waiting for him when he got out. Gristy, because he sang like a bird, he only did like 4 years, and they let him go. Percy Owens, Tex, they let him go because of lack of evidence. They let a couple of others go. The other guys, like English Bob, disappeared, vanished from history. All right, so this is the first attempted stagecoach robbery, and this is where we start to get our lore of how to do it, because other people added to it. You know, stop, put your hands up. This is a hold up, right, hands going in the air. All that stuff that's part of our Western mythology is going to come from this. Okay, that's the end of Tom Bell's story and his gang. So we covered the very first person to try to hold up a stagecoach. But I've got a whole bunch of bad boys and I'm still following around. I hope you stick with me.